There is a rapper from Atlanta who has quietly built one of the most underrated empires in hip-hop history. Not just a music career, not just a record label, an actual empire with real estate, businesses, publishing rights, and assets that most people have never heard a word about. And sitting at the center of all of it is something that will stop you cold when you hear it: a private lake. This man owns a private lake. Most people know T.I. as the king of the South. They know the albums, they know the hits. But what the world has largely missed is what Clifford Harris built in the background while everyone was focused on the music. By the time this documentary ends, you're going to understand just how deep this empire goes, how the lake fits into the larger picture, and why T.I.'s real legacy may have very little to do with rap. Yo, what's good, fam? Today we are diving deep into the full story of T.I.'s empire, from his come up in Atlanta all the way to the private lake, the real estate portfolio, the business ventures, the publishing deals, and the retirement he's been building toward for years. This one is going to hit different, so stay locked in. Before we get into the property and the businesses still generating income right now, we have to go back to where it all started. Because none of this makes sense without understanding where Clifford Joseph Harris Jr. came from and how he turned a brutal environment into fuel for everything that followed. T.I. was born on September 25, 1980, and raised in the Center Hill section of Atlanta, just off Bankhead Highway. This was not a sheltered upbringing. This was a neighborhood that had been gutted by the era, where the economy had collapsed, the infrastructure had crumbled, and young men were left to navigate circumstances that most people only read about. By the time T.I. was 14 years old, he had already been arrested multiple times on drug charges. The streets were not a phase for him. They were the environment he was actually living in. But something else was happening at the same time: music. T.I. had been rapping since childhood, developing an ear for cadence and delivery that did not sound like anything else coming out of the South at that time. He signed his first major label deal in 1999 with LaFace Records, the legendary Atlanta imprint founded by L.A. Reid and Babyface. His debut album, I'm Serious, dropped in 2001. It did not perform the way anyone had hoped. LaFace parted ways with him. Most artists do not survive that kind of early rejection. T.I. treated it like information and kept moving. He signed to Atlantic Records and in 2003 founded Grand Hustle Records, his own label imprint. That same year, he released Trap Music, and everything changed. Trap music was not just a commercial record. It was the document that gave a name and a sonic architecture to something that had been developing in Atlanta's streets for years. The production was dark and hypnotic, the percussion heavy and deliberate, the subject matter pulled straight from lived experience. Songs like Rubber Band Man and 24s resonated because they were not performing poverty for an audience. They were reports from inside it. Music historians and critics have consistently credited T.I. alongside Young Jeezy and Gucci Mane as one of the three architects of trap music as a genre. That is not a minor distinction. Trap music is now the dominant sonic language of American pop culture. T.I. was there at the beginning when it had no name and no mainstream audience, building the blueprint that an entire generation of artists would follow. Urban Legend followed in 2004. King dropped in 2006 and debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, earning T.I. the title he would carry for the rest of his career. Then came Paper Trail in 2008, the album that many still consider his commercial peak. Paper Trail went platinum multiple times over, produced multiple top 5 singles including Whatever You Like, Live Your Life with Rihanna, and Dead and Gone with Justin Timberlake, debuted at #1 and moved over 568,000 copies in its first week. It proved that a kid from Bankhead could reach the absolute top of the industry. Now here is where the financial architecture starts to reveal itself, because the album sales were only one layer of what T.I. was building. Songwriting credits generate publishing royalties every time a song is streamed, licensed for a film, used in a commercial, or played on the radio. T.I. did not just rap on his records, he wrote them. And in the music business, the person who writes the song often earns more over time than the person who performs it. Stack 20 years of writing credits across 11 studio albums and over 100 singles, and you are looking at a royalty engine that runs quietly in the background, regardless of what T.I. is doing on any given day. Add to that the touring income across 2 decades of live performances, festival headlining slots, and arena shows. Add a legitimate film career with roles in Takers, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Ride Along, Identity Thief, Get Hard, and Entourage. He was not a rapper doing a cameo to extend his cultural moment. He was a working actor with real franchise appearances, who built a Hollywood resume that generated income entirely separate from anything happening in a recording studio. Add reality television. T.I. and Tiny, the family hustle, ran on VH1 for years, generating brand sponsorships, product placements, and long-term name recognition that kept working long after any given episode aired. Add Grand Hustle Records, which signed artists and generated label revenue independent of T.I. personally recording a single note. And add endorsements that at their peak included a package deal reportedly worth $75 million covering albums, publishing, endorsements, and Grand Hustle artist signings combined. That is a machine, not a music career. But here is where it gets real. Because all of that money had to go somewhere, and T.I. made some decisions about where it went that shaped his legacy in ways that record sales alone never could have. Let's talk about the lake. Lake Spivey is Georgia's largest privately owned lake, sitting about 20 miles south of downtown Atlanta in Jonesboro, spread across Clayton and Henry counties. The numbers alone are impressive. 500 acres of water, 9 miles of shoreline, 8 communities built around its edges, each with its own marina, boat ramp, or docking point. But the detail that makes Lake Spivey truly different from any other body of water in the region is what happened in 1984, when the lake was formally deeded to the Lake Spivey Civic Association and closed to the public permanently. You cannot visit Lake Spivey as a tourist. You cannot rent a boat and spend the afternoon out there. You cannot fish from its shores unless you live on them. Access to Lake Spivey is reserved exclusively for residents of the surrounding communities, and that restriction has made it one of the most sought-after real estate locations in the entire state. The activities the lake supports are everything you would expect from a private 500-acre body of water with no public access. Boating, jet skiing, water skiing, fishing, swimming, kayaking. On a summer afternoon, the water is shared only by the people who own homes on its edges. No tourists, no day trippers. No strangers. The shoreline stays quiet because the only people on it chose to own property there. That is the real luxury of Lake Spivey. Not the acreage, not the address, the silence. It is a level of privacy that no gate or security system can replicate, because the water itself is the barrier. T.I.'s property on Lake Spivey sits on a 3-acre lot with a personal dock providing direct water access. The home is 4 stories, with 5 bedrooms and 7 full bathrooms. The grounds open directly onto the lake. Tiny Harris has spoken about how it was always her dream to live on the water, and the Lake Spivey property delivered on that in a way that very few properties in the Atlanta region could have matched. A private dock on a private lake, 20 minutes south of one of the biggest cities in the South, with their children growing up around that water every single day. But the story of how T.I. actually got his hands on it is the part that tells you everything about who he is as a man. T.I. told the full story on Shannon Sharp's podcast Club Shay Shay. He and Tiny found a home on Lake Spivey they wanted. They went through the entire process of making an offer, having it accepted, and preparing to close. Then the deal collapsed. According to T.I., word got back to the seller that a famous rapper was the buyer, and the seller pulled out. T.I. said he was never entirely certain of the reason, whether it was because he was a rapper, because he was young, because he was black, or some combination of all three. But the door had been shut on his family, and he saw the look on Tiny's face when it happened. What he did next was not subtle. He and Tiny started driving through the Lake Spivey neighborhood themselves, knocking on doors and asking homeowners directly whether they wanted to sell. They found a middle-aged Indian family who had built their home just 2 or 3 years prior. T.I. made an offer the man could not refuse. According to multiple real estate reports, he paid approximately $4.26 million for the property in 2006, which by his own admission on Club Shay Shay was roughly $500,000 over what the house was actually worth at the time. He called it one of the dumbest financial decisions he ever made. But he and Tiny raised their family in that house. Their children grew up on that lake, and millions of viewers watched them live in it for years on T.I. and Tiny, the family hustle. Without fully registering what the water in the background represented, by 2019, the couple undertook extensive renovations to the property, documented on the spin-off T.I. and Tiny, Friends and Family Hustle. Interior redesigns, kitchen updates, upgraded spaces throughout the 4-story structure. The renovation work transformed the home they had lived in for over a decade into something closer to its full potential as a lakefront compound. A private dock, a 3-acre lot, direct access to a 500-acre lake that the public cannot touch. That is not a flex. That is a lifestyle built around permanence and family. In 2020, T.I. added a second Atlanta property to his holdings, purchasing a 14,000 square foot gated estate on the Chattahoochee River for $3.265 million. 7 bedrooms, 10 bathrooms, a home theater, wine cellar, sauna, massage room, gym, spa, oversized pool, outdoor fireplace, and a guest house. The property sits on the tree-lined Chattahoochee, gated and private, designed from the ground up for a different purpose than the Lake Spivey compound. Where Lake Spivey is about family roots and the life he built over 20 years on that water, the Chattahoochee estate is built for scale, for hosting, for the kind of entertainment footprint that reflects where his career had taken him. 2 estates, 2 completely different bodies of water, one for living, one for reigning. But the real estate story does not stop at his personal residences, because T.I. made a decision that separates him from most wealthy artists who came before him. Instead of moving further away from where he came from, he moved money back toward it. He turned his attention back to the neighborhood that shaped him, and what he built there is just as impressive as any lakefront estate. In 2017, T.I. founded Buyback the Block, a real estate venture with one specific purpose: buying property in the Center Hill and Bankhead neighborhood where he grew up, and converting it into affordable housing and community development. Not luxury condos, not gentrification projects designed to push longtime residents out. Housing for the people who are already there. He partnered with APD Urban Planning and Management and Dynasty Real Estate Development to structure the work properly. He purchased corner lots across the neighborhood, including the one the HN liquor store sat on in Bankhead. He bought the building that used to house the Bankhead Seafood Restaurant. He announced a 143-unit affordable housing development on the site of a former shopping center his grandmother used to take him to, complete with the community center, garden, and greenhouse. He was direct about why. He did not want luxury condos going up and pushing out the people who were native to the community. He wanted development that would allow people who loved the neighborhood to afford to stay in it. Green spaces, gardens, a community center, amenities the neighborhood never had when he was riding his bike through it as a kid. He said he wanted to see children walk and play in those green spaces and senior citizens excited about the next generation. He focused specifically on corner lots because corner lots anchor the visual character of a block, and he worked with real estate agent Crystal Peterson to keep housing costs genuinely affordable rather than nominally affordable. That is the kind of operational detail that separates a press release initiative from actual community investment. And he challenged other successful rappers from Atlanta to account for what they had done for the city in the same terms. The business empire extends well beyond real estate. Grand Hustle Records has been operating since 2003 and helped launch artists whose careers generated royalties and label revenue independent of T.I.'s personal recording output. His AKOO clothing line, launched in 2008, brought streetwear and elevated fashion together under a brand built on his cultural credibility. He co-founded a new chapter of Bankhead Seafood with Killer Mike, securing a $1.2 million loan from Greenwood and Georgia Banking Company in late 2023 to open the restaurant in 2024, bringing jobs and a dining institution back to the neighborhood the name pays tribute to. He executive produced P-Valley for Stars, a critically acclaimed drama that generated content licensing revenue through streaming and syndication. And in December 2025, he released a comedy special, Cheaper Than Therapy, distributed through his own platform, Tip Ain't Funny, rather than through a traditional network or streamer. Then came the legal victory that nobody outside the courtroom fully anticipated. In September 2024, a federal jury awarded T.I. and Tiny $71 million in their lawsuit against toy company MGA Entertainment. The case centered on allegations that MGA's wildly popular LOL Surprise OMG line of dolls had stolen the name, image, and aesthetic of the OMG Girls, a teen pop group T.I. and Tiny had founded in 2009 that included Tiny's daughter, Zonique Pullins, alongside members Baja Rodriguez and Barana Womack. The group was known for their colorful, distinctive visual identity, And T.I. and Tiny argued that MGA had lifted that identity wholesale and built a billion-dollar toy franchise on top of it, without permission, without credit, and without compensation. The legal fight ran for over 4 years and went through 3 separate trials. The first ended in a mistrial. The second ended in a win for MGA Entertainment, but a Supreme Court ruling in June 2023 allowed the case to be retried under a new standard for how consumer confusion should be weighted in infringement cases. The third trial lasted 3 weeks in a federal courtroom in Santa Ana, California. When the jury came back, they found that 7 of MGA's dolls had copied the OMG Girls' likeness and trade dress. The award was $17.9 million in compensatory damages and $53.6 million in punitive damages. $71 million total for a corporation that had sold over 40 million of those dolls and whose lawyers had publicly called the allegations baseless and offensive. MGA's founder called T.I. and Tiny extortionists. T.I.'s response was direct. He said that kind of condescension comes from not being in touch with the reality of culture after you have gone so long with nobody standing up and speaking against you. T.I. and Tiny fought a billion-dollar company for 4 years and won. Now let's talk about what may be the most strategically significant move of this final chapter. In July 2026, T.I. and New York-based Reservoir Media announced a worldwide publishing deal covering his entire catalog, from his 2001 debut I'm Serious all the way through Kill the King. Reservoir acquired the rights to T.I.'s compositions across more than 2 decades of recording, including his writing contributions to other artists' albums. B.O.B., A$AP Rocky, Slim Thug, Trey Songz, Dave East, Sean Kingston, and Big K.R.I. all carry T.I. songwriting credits. Every one of those credits generates royalty income every time the song is streamed, licensed for a film, placed in a television show, or played on the radio. Reservoir is one of the most aggressive music publishing acquirers in the world, having spent close to $1 billion on catalog acquisitions since its founding. They do not sign deals for sentimental reasons. Their business model is built on identifying catalogs that would generate increasing returns through streaming growth, sync licensing in film and television, advertising placements, and emerging formats like AI training licensing that are still being negotiated across the industry. When Reservoir describes a catalog as having cultural significance and staying power, that is business language for a body of work they expect to keep producing meaningful cash flow for decades. T.I.'s catalog qualifies on every measure they care about. 11 studio albums, over 100 singles, 13 mixtapes, 14 million albums sold worldwide, 3 Grammy wins. Songs like What You Know, Bring 'Em Out, Live Your Life, and Whatever You Like are not fading from the rotation. They are embedded in the permanent architecture of hip-hop culture, which means every new streaming platform, every film that needs a 2000 soundtrack moment, every commercial that wants to evoke that era of Atlanta rap is a potential licensing opportunity. The deal also extends to Kill the King, meaning Reservoir is invested in the commercial performance of T.I.'s final album, not just his legacy catalog. For T.I., the agreement converts 25 years of creative output into a long-term income stream managed by a company whose entire operation is built around maximizing exactly that kind of value. The work is already done. The songs already exist. The catalog is already embedded in the culture. Now it just keeps earning. That brings us to Kill the King, and to the retirement that has been years in the making. T.I. first mentioned a final album called Kill the King back in 2017 on The Breakfast Club. The logic was simple and characteristically sharp. He had given himself the title of King of the South from the beginning of his career. In chess, the object of the game is to kill the king. So the title of his last album would reflect that act of self-completion, choosing to end the game on his own terms. He teased formal confirmation in 2021. Then at the 2026 Grammy Awards, he made it official. The rollout was deliberate and symbolic. In January 2026, he dropped Let 'Em Know, a Pharrell Williams-produced lead single whose music video showed T.I. shaving off his dreadlocks. A clean visual break from the version of himself that had spent the pandemic years stepping back from the grind. In March came Trauma Bond, a reflective track featuring the Tuskegee University Marching Crimson Pipers. In May, Mr. Him, another Pharrell collaboration built for the summer. Kill the King arrived on June 26, 2026, featuring Dr. Dre, Usher, Anderson .Paak, NBA YoungBoy, and more debuting in the top 10 on both the Billboard Top R&B Hip-Hop Albums and Top Rap Albums charts. T.I. opened the 2026 BET Awards with a performance. Complex reviewed the album under the headline, "T.I.'s final album, Kill the King, isn't peak tip, but it's the right way to exit," which is about as graceful a send-off as any artist can hope for from a publication that does not give those out easily. On the BET Awards red carpet, T.I. clarified what retirement actually means. He said he believes he has many gifts that he can spend more time and attention on, and that he wants to be home more with his family and his grandchildren. He was careful to note that stepping away from solo albums does not mean permanent silence. Soundtracks, collaborations, who knows? What he is walking away from is the obligation of the full-time recording cycle. What he is walking toward is more film, more television, more real estate development, and the King's succession tour alongside his sons Damani and King Harris. He said it plainly. It is their time to speak for the generation. Net worth estimates for T.I. in 2026 range between $30 million and $50 million, depending on the source and how private real estate, business equity, and legal settlements are valued. The variance reflects how much of his wealth sits in assets that are genuinely difficult to price from the outside. Private property, private label equity, royalty income that fluctuates with streaming trends, and a legal judgment still working through appeals. But the precise figure matters less than what that number is made of. Music royalties flowing in from over 2 decades of catalog. Publishing rights now managed by one of the world's leading catalog companies. Label revenue from Grand Hustle. 2 Atlanta properties on 2 different bodies of water, plus a community real estate portfolio in Bankhead. Film and television income. A clothing line. A restaurant co-founded with Killer Mike. A cell phone comedy platform. An empire built one deliberate decision at a time across more than 2 decades in one of the most unpredictable industries on earth. T.I. has been consistent about the underlying philosophy every time he has spoken about money and ownership publicly. The real wealth is not in what you earn, it is in what you own. That distinction drives every major decision in his business portfolio. Buyback the Block is ownership in a neighborhood that shaped him. The Reservoir Publishing deal is ownership of the intellectual property he spent 25 years creating. Grand Hustle is ownership of the label infrastructure that generates revenue from artists he signed and developed. The Bankhead Seafood Restaurant is ownership of a cultural institution in a community that raised him. And the house on Lake Spivey, the one he paid $500,000 over asking price for because someone tried to close the door on his family, is ownership in the most personal and human sense of the word. He went door to door in the neighborhood that had already told him no once, found a family willing to sell, overpaid without hesitation, and built 20 years of memories on the water with his children. That is the empire. Every piece of it built with the same hunger he brought to Center Hill before the world knew his name. The King of the South is not retiring from business. He is retiring from the part of the grind that he no longer needs. And the lake, sitting there on 3 private acres in Jonesboro, with a dot pointing out over 500 acres of water that the public cannot touch, is proof that he figured out exactly how to get what he wanted, even when the door was slammed in his face. The empire was never just the music. It was always everything else. What are your thoughts on T.I.'s legacy, fam? Drop them in the comments and click on the video on screen for more content like this.